This is something that I'm going to start doing not only for my students, but for future members that decide that they're either going to watch me progress through YouTube or any other social media, but also if they want to start learning online, I'm going to start having a section of actually vlogging. First time that I've ever done this, so we'll see how it works. For right now, I just want to give you guys a little bit of an intro, just a quick how I started, kind of my journey, my process, and how it's got to me where I am today. I started in martial arts when I was 6 years old in Georgia. I did American martial arts and really just fell in love with it, but looked at it more as a hobby, not as something. I mean, obviously, I was 6 years old. I'm not going to turn that into a career at that young of an age. But it was really the only sport that I fell in love with. Being a military family, we moved around a lot. So eventually, my dad got moved to Virginia. And in Virginia, we found another style. We've actually found the Chuck Norris system. Back then, it was called Chunk Do. So through that, I was about 9 years old. So it was about 3 years later, I started at the very beginning, and just the atmosphere that was there is something definitely that set me up for how I have my atmospheres here at the studio that I currently own. So at the age of 9, I started, and I progressed very quickly. I was there 4 days, 5 days, sometimes even 6 days a week. I kind of coined myself as a mat rat, meaning anytime that I could get on the mat, I was on the mat. My instructor at the time, her and I became very close as the years went over, which I'll get into a little bit later. So finally at the age of 12, because I had previous martial arts experience, I was able to progress quickly. So at the age of 12, I actually tested for my first degree black belt. And back then you could get your actual first degree black belt. Nowadays they have it to where there's a junior level and then an adult level. But back then at the age of 12, you were able to get your actual black belt. From there, I had started teaching classes, and that was probably the turning point when I was like, hey, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So started teaching classes at 12, continued to progress and train, continued to coin myself as a mat rat. I was there all the time. Anytime that I could be there, I was there. I was there for every single one of the classes, including the adult class. So I'd get there from like 3, 4 in the afternoon, and I wasn't out of there until almost 9 o'clock at night. Sometimes even 10 o'clock, depending on what the black belts would do at the end of class. So sometimes we'd have little mini training sessions, working on new skills and things like that. So 4 days a week, that was my schedule. And then every Saturday, usually there was classes going on that I was attending as well. So something happened. My master instructor, she had to leave during the summer while I was 14. And during that time frame, me and a few of the other black belts kind of took on the classes and took on the martial arts dojo. One thing that kind of put me at an advantage in being able to take on classes and things like that was I was homeschooled. So during the day, I could get there earlier, meaning I was taking on more classes and just perfecting my skill as a teacher. I mean, it was rough at first. There was definitely a lot of tears cried at night whenever I went home, but not only did I developed my love of martial arts, and then during this year of 14 and 15, I really developed a love of teaching and really just kind of got that experience in. And I was even teaching adults and different things like that, that was probably the scariest part for a young 14-year-old girl. But not only did it test my maturity, but it also tested me as a person, me as an instructor, and me as a future martial artist. It challenged me, and I definitely like a challenge. So at the age of 14, while my instructor's away, me and a few other black belts were kind of running the studio. When she came back, some of them stayed, some of them didn't. It kind of just depended on where their life led. But man, I was in it. I stayed. I was still teaching as many classes as I could, coming in as often as I could. I've definitely found my passion, and I decided that when I went to college, I wanted to get a degree that would supplement the teaching aspect, the people aspect. So I started working towards that and just continuing my teaching and training and different things like that. 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week. I was at the mat all the time. At the young age, she gave me a lot of responsibility, which definitely defined me as the person I am today. So time went on. Some of the other instructors went on to college at different places. I stayed local for cost efficiency and things like that, but also just to kind of I was comfortable. The job that I had, helping her run the studio and teaching all the classes was just something I really enjoyed, and I thought it would be better than flipping burgers somewhere. It was my passion. I didn't really want to move on into a different type of job when I knew this is what I was going to end up doing. So even though I wasn't making, tons of money and different things like that, it was the experience. And it was under the table a little bit too. So I was able to, pay for food and gas and whatever teenager college student wanted to buy at that time. It was enough for me at that time. So time went on. I was the head instructor for a while. It was me, a couple of the people to come in and out and, be a head instructor as well. We'd partner up, or sometimes they'd have to leave, but I was there the most consistently. At the age of probably around 20, she decided she was going to retire. And at that time, I didn't know where my life was going to go. I still lived in Virginia, but I was kind of coming to the tail end of my college. I think I had a couple more years left. And I just met a guy in West Virginia on a road trip. So I didn't really know what was going to happen. So instead of buying the studio from her, I bought all of the equipment, but I let the studio go. People were coming out of the woodwork and wanted me to do house lessons. So while I was still continuing my college, I was driving from house to house before and after classes and doing in-home private lessons. Eventually, I got about 12 people that were doing in-home private lessons, and one of the little boys, he was about 8 at the time, he decided that he was going to talk to his pastor and see if the pastor would give me some space at the church. So his little 8-year-old boy talked to this pastor, and that was kind of my eye-opening. I was like, yeah, we need a place to train. We need a place to have basically a communion of all of us together. So I called this pastor up and I said, hey, there's a little boy that goes to your church, and he recommended me reach out to you and see if you had some space. So we worked something out. Is about I paid by the hour, so I ended up paying about $600 a month for about 2 or 3 days a week. And sometimes I would rent extra, so sometimes we'd rent time on the weekends. And the 12 people that I had, we just looked at it as a place to train, and what their tuition was went back into the studio. So it wasn't, I didn't make a profit or anything, but it was enough for me to continue through college, and it was enough for me to provide a space for them and myself to train. Well, fast forward to age 22, and I had about 40 to 50 students coming regularly at this little church. No advertisement or anything, it's all hearsay. And I was actually making just a little bit of profit, which was really, really nice. So 22 into 23, I was actually doing very well, and I was looking at buying a larger facility. But as I mentioned earlier, at the age of 20, I started dating an individual from West Virginia. He ended up proposing, so I had to make a decision. Do I force him to move out of his state where he had a very good job to support my dream, or do I uproot this tiny little church studio that I had and make myself bigger in West Virginia? So I weighed out the pros and cons for about a year, probably up until the moment that I got married. And I was still traveling back and forth after I got married, running this little studio, but it became too much. So I decided to give it over to someone else. So some of my very, very good friends that were under me in rank just a little bit there, or they worked with me there, and they took over, and they still continue to run it to this day. But I decided to move to West Virginia, move my studio there. So I was like, I'm going to have to find a place. Prices are cheaper here, but my now husband and I decided that we were going to keep everything separate. I was going to try to run this 100% on my own. So I was looking around. I was like, okay, might have to take out a loan, might have to do this, that, and the other thing. Talked to a gym owner. He did jiu-jitsu. And he said that I could kind of go underneath of him for a little until I got on my feet and just pay him what I could. So I had, in my very first class, I had 5 students, and we were in this very well-used jiu-jitsu gym with all of their jiu-jitsu stuff and things like that. And we had our first class in November when I was 23. So, man, when was that? 2018, I think? So very first class in November 2018. and I think there's like maybe 5 people. So I was like, all right, this is a good start. I was doing a lot of research. It takes about 3 years to get, up to numbers and different things like that. But he was very lenient, so I didn't have to take out any loans, and whatever money I did have, I gave him. So by May of 2019, so not even a full year, I had up to 40 students. So it had grown that much. Again, I didn't have much advertisement or anything. I did one little ad in the paper, and that boosted it significantly. But the problem is a lot of the students that were looking for me would end up signing up under him. Or some of the students that were looking for him were signing up under me. So not that it caused any friction, but I just noticed that there was going to be problems if I stayed. So I started looking around, and within, just a few weeks, I found a place just down the road. From where I was, it wasn't even half a mile. Like, I could walk there in 5 minutes, no problem. So I found a location. The space was larger, but the most important thing was it was going to be mine. So I was like, all right, this should do. Parking was limited, but any town that you're going to be in, that's probably the biggest issue is parking. And so I talked to this guy, signed the papers in April, or I think May 1st is when I signed the papers. So the transition was very quick. With 40 students and probably, significantly paying from $600 in Virginia to half of the other guy's rent, which was close to around or less than what I was paying in Virginia. It was tripled. So I went from having 40 students, just barely able to make it at that one studio, to 40 students and absolutely having like the payments were required and all this other stuff, like a regular rent. So I opened up. A lot of sleepless nights, but I did it. Still have not had to take a loan out yet. And so we were there, and we went from having used mats that were donated to being able to buy all new stuff, to being able to remodel a little bit so we had more space, and just kind of, it looked like everything was going well until parking started becoming an issue. People were blocking other people in. Other businesses around us were getting frustrated that we kept using their parking. So inside, it felt like we had enough space, but on the outside, we were outgrowing, and there's just nowhere else to park because other businesses were just competitive with their parking. So come January of 2020 of this year, I realized that we were outgrowing, and looking at the student, I had doubled the student base. So I went from 40 students to about 80 students in just a few months. So in January, I realized that, and I was like, might have to move, might have to do something else about the parking, might have to buy some parking, and just kind of going back and forth. So in March of 2020, I was walking down the road in town, and I saw an old restaurant that had a for lease sign. I was like, I'll call, because other places I called and the rent was triple. It was ridiculous, like $8,000 a month, $10,000 a month. And I was just like, I just can't do that right now. So I called this place, and the square footage was about 4,000 square feet, but of actual usable space is probably about 2,500 square feet. So a good amount. And I was like, that might work, but everywhere is charging a significant amount for rent, is a high demand. So I called the guy, and he cut me a deal. So he went from the price that he knocked it down $500-$600. So I was like, and it was significantly less than a lot of the other places. So I was like, it's going to be a stretch. It was just over double what I was paying at my first location. And there I was doing well. But there was still some struggle here and there. I still didn't have to take out a loan or anything, but wasn't making any profit. Everything that I had went right back into the studio. So I was like, okay, double the rent, 80 students. I can do that. I can get by with the skin of my teeth. Don't have to take out a loan, though, because that's my big thing. I didn't want to take out a loan. So I just kind of on a whim, my lease was running up in May 1st of this year at the old location. And so I signed it for April. So I was going to have to pay a double rent, but I had enough saved up. So I had what I called stock money drawer. So I had enough saved up, and I was like, okay, it'll be fine. And then the pandemic hit, which I think affected a lot of businesses. It definitely affected mine, especially since I had to pay the double rent. So that money that I saved up which could have gone towards my expensive, ended up going to the other landlord, just to kind of close the business off so that it wasn't, mine anymore. No, the responsibility wasn't mine. And then having more than double the rent at the new location, it definitely hit kind of hard. I had the money saved up in April. May hit, and May was a little bit interesting, but I was able to kind of start an online school. It's very, very rough around the edges. It was a lot of Facebook Live that didn't work. It was a lot of Zoom with no signal, and people were dropping this and that. It was a lot of just like, hey, send me a 5-minute video clip. I'll send you one, back and forth. So just a lot of communication with the students that I had. And my student base went from about 80 to back down to about 30, 40. So I kind of started where I began. And so that was May, and most of April and May, that's what I was working with. So June comes around, everything's opening back up. And so now we're here, and things are back to normal until the pandemic hits again. So it kind of made me realize I'm in this point now where financially I'm okay, still haven't had to take out a loan or anything. But I'm at a point now where I need to grow my business, and one of the ways that I think I'm going to have to grow it is kind of getting better at this whole online side of the martial arts industry, which is where I have this YouTube site set up. It'll start off rock and rough, just like other YouTube sites work. But I think I definitely want to connect to not only the local community here in West Virginia, but I also think, why not go bigger? So I started off as just a little old karate studio in Stafford in a church to having almost 100 students within just a short amount of time. Why not build that on my online? Why not do that? Plus, I've had so many years experience since I was 6, and I'm going on 26 now, so 20 years of experience right there, doing nothing but martial arts, Chuck Norris system, jiu-jitsu. I've trained in Aikido, boxing, kickboxing, you name it. I've just always been a mat rat. So this is kind of, I guess, the first video that I'm really going to start. We'll see how vlogs work. I've been looking at other sites that are really awesome and just kind of seeing how they run things. And I don't want to copy how they do things, but I definitely want to learn from other sites out there. So obviously in comments below, if you do happen to find this, I'll take all the comments that I can. And if you criticize me, I'll just ignore you. So criticize away. But yeah, so let's get this started, and I plan on also posting not only vlogs here. I don't know if I'm going to do like every week at first. It might be like every other week, just kind of like progress, get different video ideas. But we're going to do a vlog section. We're going to do a technique section, different things like that. Try to make it exciting. Different drills that I do, maybe have some classes. We'll divide it up, make it look organized and neat, and probably get some people to help me with that because I'm only so detailed with things like that, and just kind of go from there. And so yeah, so this will be the first real step in me trying to build my online presence. Hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to getting to know anybody who's interested in getting to know me on this site. And if you have any questions, by all means, let me know.